Okay, just a moment here. Oh, why does mine say recording already? Okay.
So, welcome everyone. I know we're a small band, merry band, starting this evening, and there may be more joining us as we move along. But welcome to this introduction to communing with nature. And I'd like you to have a journal on hand so that you can take notes as we move through this time, because I'd like it to be experiential. What we're looking at this evening is our relationship with nature and the soul of the world. And this is where we begin, close to the ground. As this woman touches the earth, I wonder, is she grieving or praying or simply touching the ground? And maybe she's doing all of these. For an authentic relationship with nature can touch every part of our soul. We know that we are intimately part of nature just by being a spirit being in a human body. But this is also true of everything in the natural world. Every body is different, whether it's of the body of a bark-skinned tree, or a furry dog body, or a fluid river body, or a cool stone body. And everything within those bodies has a unique spirit. We have forgotten this, the relationship of body and spirit, and our relationship with the spirit of the body of the earth. And having lost this awareness, it is costing us a great deal. Thich Nhat Hanh says, what we need most to do is hear within us the sounds of the earth crying. And that's not an easy thing to do, because though the cries of the earth can be heard almost everywhere now, we have to open the ears of our heart to be able to hear that cry. Francis Weller says, it takes a heart of courage and conviction, one willing to look into the center of the suffering and remain present. And that's the challenge, to remain fully present. Let's take a look at what I mean by the word nature, because this is not a simple word in my estimation or experience. And I'd like to explore a more expanded definition that takes us into what I call the soul of the world. Another word for that is the anima mundi. The scientist James Lovelock coined the name Gaia for the earth from Greek mythology, and he was recognizing that the earth is a living, self-sustaining, and intelligent field of energy. Everything, in my experience, everything in the natural world can offer a portal into other realms. Every flower may have a different story and a unique vibratory frequency. And when I would get very grounded and quiet, open my heart and listen to my intuition, I could perceive the subtle messages and feel the sensations in my body of what each plant was saying to me. I experience the spirit of nature as an animating yin presence, a feminine presence. And maybe this is why many cultures speak about Mother Earth, recognizing that this energy is a distinctly feminine quality, something welcoming. We can also recognize her in her form as Kali, This is also a distinctly feminine presence, but Kali is the Hindu goddess who is both a divine protector and a liberator, and she can bring things to life and to death. So we see Kali at work more with the tsunamis and the earthquakes, the havoc that can be wreaked on the earth, but is also at the same time bringing a new level of balance. Nature's expression is always one of majesty and mystery. Her way is innately harmonious and balancing. And we witness her through the beauty and the exquisite reciprocity, always at work within the web of creation. As a dynamically coordinated system, nature is ever changing, ever fluid, never fixed. The spirit of nature is an animating force within all matter. And this is where we could use another definition to serve us. Because when we generally speak about nature or spirit, when we speak about it, spirit, most of the time we're talking about a disembodied God in the heavens, accessible only after we die. Carl Jung called that experience of spirit Lumen Dei, the light of God. And it is a transcendent light that we can touch in moments of numinosity. But he said there is another spirit, and that is the spirit within nature, and he called this Lumen Natura, the light within matter. And in this webinar series, this is the light that we will be exploring. For it's this quality of light that has been forgotten and abandoned in our quest to be spiritual much of the time. We have ignored the light that is present in creation. The Lumen Natura is exquisitely differentiated through each form. I love this image of the lemon. And it's expressed through patterns and forms of intricate beauty. We see it, the light in the eyes of this beautiful child, or a dancing bird at sunrise. And the light within nature has a rhythmic quality, ever changing and evolving, never static. Nature achieves all of this through a very coordinated functionality, diversity, and interdependence within the web of creation. Everything serves a purpose. We have so much to learn about harmonious community from studying nature. She is full of mystery. And we often sense when I go into a forest, particularly an old growth forest, I have a shiver of something other there. Joanna Macy spoke about this as, the mystery at the core of our existence is simple. We are held in a web of mutual belonging. Held is a beautiful word, for this sense of being embraced has really characterized my own experience of communing with nature. Welcome to those who are just joining the call now. Alicia, maybe you can just mention about the bar at the top.
I was just thinking that. Thank you. So for those who have just joined us, if you do see two windows of video, one with myself and one with Andrea's face, we invite you to minimize that window so you can really get into the slideshow. And how to do that is you'll notice at the top of the top image person that you see, there are 4 different sized rectangles, and the one in the farthest left corner that looks like a dash, that will be the one to select to minimize the window. So we welcome you to do that at this time.
Thank you, Alicia. I'd like to share a little bit of my personal story and give you a bit of a brief overview of how I've landed in the work that I'm doing now. I grew up in a very small town on Vancouver Island, close to a large lake. And for the first 15 years of my life, I lived in this rather isolated yet idyllic setting. This is not an actual picture of it. And I didn't recognize at the time that this shaped much of who I was in my psyche. From my early teen years, my head was often in the clouds because I was intrigued with big ideas and aspirations. And this led me into a spiritual community where for 20 years, I continued reaching for spirit, often ignoring my feelings, my body, and out of touch with the rhythms of the earth. When I left this community around the time I was 40, I was quite disillusioned and broken, and I turned to gardening for solace and grounding. The idea of plants having a spirit felt more appealing and safe and trustworthy than the disembodied dogmatic ideas that had fascinated me earlier. And as I gardened, I began to sense the welcoming warmth and gentle invitation from the plants to come closer, to listen. And it was honoring this call that has captivated me for the past 25 years. This is a picture of the garden that here at Grey Heron when I first bought the property 20 years ago. A nicely trimmed cedar hedge and a nicely mowed lawn. It stayed like that only for a brief time. And this is a picture of what it looked like a few years ago. A really beautiful jungle of a garden, which mirrors much more the inner life that is within me. This is one of the things that gardens do. If we allow a soulful reciprocity to occur, our gardens will mirror who we are internally. This is a sign I have in my garden. I have several frogs throughout the garden. And I love this phrase, where the garden is where a soul feels at home. And being at home is really what communing with nature is all about. As I mentioned, my entry through much of this last 20 years has been through an intimacy with the flowers. They don't pretend. They don't have any masks and they cannot lie. They simply are who they are, and they reveal it through every part of their being. They reveal their essence and their souls through the beauty of their form. And the closer I got to them and the more I listened, the more they revealed their stories to me through the creation of hundreds of flower essences. Here's an example of one essence story. This is the calla lily. This flower amplifies our heart's ability to penetrate any situation with the power of love, unifying opposing forces within our psyches into a sacred inner marriage. No wonder many people like to use calla lilies at their wedding. I also shifted my focus from the plants after some time to a deeper meditative awareness or communion with the spirit of the earth, with Gaia. And out of that, I created a book of poetry called Gaia's Invitation, where I was listening for the voice of the earth. My practice realm was listening to the flowers, and this was a very concentrated period of time of 9 months where I put myself into intimate meditations with the spirit of the earth. I'd like to read this to you now. And Gaia's voice is speaking in the first person here. She says, I have endless secrets to share, and you have many ways to listen. When you are quiet and still, I may enter your thoughts on butterfly wings. I speak in your flesh with your body's clear language. I sing to you constantly through every breeze, river, and leaf. Our conversations never cease. Are you willing to listen? And that really is the question. When I've held Communing with Nature workshops here at Grey Heron, I often ask people what drew them to nature, what attracted them when they were children. These experiences can be very precious, but I notice that people don't easily discuss these. They don't volunteer these experiences, partly because I don't think our culture has ways to integrate these experiences. So maybe we are very shy about them. And the other reason I think is because these experiences are so precious, it is hard to share something that's so close to our heart and private. But I'd like to ask you to take your journals now or a piece of paper, and I'm going to give you a minute to just write about when you were a child, what you felt connected to. What attracted you? What elements of nature did you feel drawn to when you were a child? And Alicia, maybe you could introduce the chat box.
At the bottom, either at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on your computer, you'll see a row of icons. If you click on the one that says chat that has a speech bubble with 3 dots inside, then you can share with the group. So if there's any aspect of that childhood connection that you'd like to share, or even what in nature drew you, we welcome you to share that with us as well.
I'm giving you time during this webinar to write your own ideas, because I will share my experience and open things to you. But really, it is a remembering yourself of what is important to you, the stirring within your own heart and consciousness that is going to make this much more real for you. So let's move on now. Thank you for those of you that wrote. Oh, catching frogs and snakes. Oh my goodness. Wonderful. Okay. We just close the chat box for now. The next section, this webinar has about 5 or 6 sections, and this one is about remembering a forgotten language. To be native to a place, we must learn to speak its language. And that just doesn't mean the language of the people, like French or Spanish, Latin or Italian, but the language of the land. What kind of education would it take us to learn the language of a different landscape? Now, I know you, Brad, have just moved to Newfoundland, so you're learning the language of a very different part of the world than you were living when you were living here in Ontario. And the same with you, Oti. You've spoken to me about your relationship with the land in Finland and how different, what is evoked in you that is so different than here in Ontario. This is a part of our remembering something, but again, it is not spoken of. Thomas Berry says, every being has its own voice. Every being declares itself to the entire universe, and every being enters into community with other beings. And you just feel the weight of that paw in the human's hand. Richard Louv, who has written a book called The Last Child in the Woods, has coined a phrase that's becoming quite popular. He says, we are suffering from a nature deficit disorder. And his concern is that children are growing up with very little free time in the natural world. And that is the loss of a great soulful language. We have also lost many of the rituals that would sustain a respectful relationship with the spirits of the earth. And many of these are traditions that have been preserved by indigenous cultures for millennia. Traditions that are passed on orally from elders to children or through direct experience of rituals with initiation and ceremony, and certainly through storytelling. These are ways that we have given over to internet or other television, other ways that are not direct, but have an intermediary. Again, there is a loss of soul in that. Thomas Berry again says, we're not talking to the river. We're not listening to the winds and the stars. We have broken the great conversation, and by breaking that conversation, we have shattered the universe. The world about us has become an it rather than a thou. In these next couple of slides, there are the basic premises of what we are going to be exploring in the 3-part webinar series. Fundamental is the recognition that everything has a soul. And because it does, we can find our point of entry into the soul of the other. I spoke once at a gathering and made the comment that nature is lonely. And a woman sat up and she said, that idea is shocking. But it is my deep belief that nature is crying out to be met and witnessed as she goes through this time of profound change. How we bring ourselves to meet her, to address this deep loneliness is different for each one of us. At the same time, our body souls are equally starved for this connection, nourishment, and the compassionate guidance that nature can offer us as everything continues to shift in our human world. One of the saddest things is we don't know what we are starved for anymore. And the last point is that our presence and our deep listening to any and everything in the natural world has a subtle yet profound effect upon us and upon the soul of the world. Now, that is not a statement that I can back up scientifically, but I have seen it at work over and over and again when people reach out and make a connection to some aspect of the natural world. Something begins to come alive, not just in them, but in the atmosphere of their garden, their home, their body, soul. There is no limit to what the soul of the world is. And it only takes a moment to connect. I'd like you to take a moment again in your journal to write down a couple of the things that call you. You spoke about, in the last time I asked you what called you as a child, but when you look for what calls you to a sense of home now, what kind of landscape, what elements draw you in? I have a brass bowl and I'm going to give 8 slow taps on the bowl for you to write during this time. Our next section is about honoring the different roles that nature plays in our lives. For me, she has been a mirror. I shared this about how my garden has been a mirror. And anytime I take a certain emotion or a question out into the natural world, I will find that there is something reflecting back, mirroring what I need to feel and see, but from the beautiful diversity, beauty, and articulate expression of nature. Nature is also mother to many people. I have had many clients who have had traumatic experiences as children, and where they didn't feel safe in their homes, but they would go out and climb a tree or crawl under the branches of a pine tree and look to nature to be that mother that maybe their mother could not provide. Certainly, the inspiration that I've gained from communing with nature has given me volumes of writings, a depth of wisdom and understanding that I could not have had if I just sat at my desk and did a lot of mental thinking. I've also watched as people have gone out during workshops out into the back garden and let themselves be drawn to something and come back with their faces lit up with the experience of an inspiration that they have received from a small moment, a brief encounter with a flower or a tree or a stone. This is beautifully beautiful to witness because the inspiration is so present and available. We know nature's role as a healer, but I think aside from looking at remedies and healing products, just the atmosphere of being in nature, they're starting to recognize, I think they call them nature baths or forest walks, that the amount of energy received when people walk barefoot on the land or breathe in these natural things has profound and subtle healing effects that we cannot ignore. And home. I think, however, we find our way into a richly nourishing home setting within the natural world is integral, whether we go camping. In my garden, I have a tent that I put out in the summertime in the backyard, just because I like to go to ground there. But to feel comfortable and at home in the natural world is deeply satisfying to the body soul. David Abram says, to directly perceive any phenomenon is to enter into relation with it, to feel oneself in a living interaction with another being. And now I'm going to lead you through 12 slides, and I'd like you to pick up your pen again. And I'm going to give you just about 10 seconds for each of these slides. And I'd like you to write down one or two words about the feeling that you get when you look at each image. This is just a nice landing point because this is like our home in nature. But that each scene that I'm choosing for you, if there is a sense of resonance, notice what that feeling stirs in your heart and jot it down briefly. Don't edit, don't think too much. Here we go. And that's our final image. Now I'd like you to review your notes and choose 3 words, circle 3 words that perhaps are central to the essence of your communion with nature. And if you feel compelled to share these on the chat box, that might be lovely for us to see what is emerging here. Alicia says, intimate, tender, freedom. And Joe, serene, peace, solitude. These are the precious things that hold you and define your relationship with nature. Words cannot convey the depth of what you're experiencing. Soaring wind and fragrant. Oti says the womb of water, wise trees, spirit clouds. See, even with simple images, you already are in that state of intimacy and communion. Wonderful. Thank you all. Let's move on. The great god Pan is dead. This is the section where we look at what is lost in the world. And God was the wild man, part goat and part human, very sexual and highly fertile. He was the god of woodlands, groves, and fields. But when he was declared dead, the people wept. Now, though this was back centuries ago, this was not the only story of the death of nature or that primal part of nature. Even earlier, the story of Gilgamesh, there was a character in that story called Enkidu, who also was a wild man and intimately connected with the natural world. He was Gilgamesh's best friend, but Gilgamesh drove Enkidu away from his natural, wild, connected, earthy part and turned his heritage against him by asking him to kill the guardian of the forest. And this act brought on the wrath of the gods, and Enkidu was killed. This is the state of where we are now, boxed in a world of our own creating, a sense of separateness. But if we approach life as separate, we will only see the reflection of our own dysfunction. And that's certainly operational in the world right now. Having just opened our eyes to the beauty of the natural world in the previous slides, and letting ourselves be nourished and remembering our connection through those images, I'm going to take you into some of the harsher realities. Remember at the beginning of the slideshow, there was a quote that it is difficult to stay present when we do see these things. And all I want you to do is be aware of what you are feeling in your body and in your heart as you look at these. Is this an oil spill? This needs no explanation. And just take a moment to jot down what you felt in your body while viewing these images. And maybe you would like to add this to the chat box. Pain in my heart, shame, pain and presence. Tightness and constriction of heart space and grief. Sadness and empathy. Thank you for your comments. This is a quote from Joanna Macy, and it's very beautiful at a time like this. She says, "Don't ever apologize for crying for the trees burning in the Amazon or over the waters polluted from mines in the Rockies. It is a measure of your open heart. And as your heart breaks open, there will be room for the world to heal." As our hearts break open, there will be room for the world to heal. In essence, that is why, one of the profound reasons why, we must learn how to commune with nature again. And this leads us into the final section, which is our role in the restoration. The image of this child walking across the river of the great goddess, or at least that's how I interpret this picture, is an image of our child self that is the guide through a sense of awe and wonder for us to begin reclaiming our birthright, our personal and unique connection with nature. We cannot do this with our adult mind alone. Here are some of the simple ways that we can begin to restore our primal connection with the earth. By witnessing creation with curiosity and love. By intimately engaging with the other. By establishing a nourishing space for ourselves in the natural world. I'd love to have a bedroom like that. By communing without words. By taking time, waiting patiently, and being with the other on their terms, not ours. Remembering how to play outdoors. And barefoot is a great way to start. Getting messy and muddy. Celebrating our animal bodies. and gazing with clear eyes at what is right before us. Walking with a sense of being cloaked in beauty. And honoring the wisdom ways of our ancestors. Finally, blessing and protecting all beings. Now I'd like to sum up with just a few comments about the actual webinar series. These sessions will begin next Tuesday, 3 evening webinars, and the dates are February the 7th, February the 28th, and March the 31st. And each webinar will include some practical suggestions for how to commune with nature. There will be some guided meditations, and like this evening, some questions for reflection. And I love using evocative images to inspire our conversations. Between the sessions, I will give you some creative assignments, and these are optional, but it is helpful for you to have something to go out into the natural world and experience. And then you could bring back your stories and your personal experiences, and they will be included in the next webinar. So in that sense, there is some homework, but that's designed to take you deeper. I will give you, again, like this evening, time to write in your wisdom pages. And this is the heart and gold of your experience. What you write from your own heart knowing is far more meaningful to you than anything I will share. There are 2 packages for the webinars. The first is the basic package of just the 3 webinars, and that's $75. Then there's the gold package for $120, and this includes the book of poetry called Gaia's Invitation and cards that are using the poems as a divinatory resource. This is a way of increasing your sense of the synchronicity of Gaia's messages for you, what is pertinent for you as a wisdom point or a point of inspiration. The gold package also includes a free intuitive consultation with me for about a half an hour to select some flower essences that can support you in your dialogue and communion with the natural world. Because I feel that the communion is so important at this time, as a countermeasure to all the political and unrest that's going on in the world, the flowers essences can help to be very grounding and stabilizing. But because I have so many, a personal consultation will fine-tune exactly what you need to keep you grounded. And it's not the same for everybody. So those are the 2 options for this. You can sign up for these on the online store if you're interested in participating in the whole venture. Also, there's going to be a recommended reading list with books and articles that I'll share in the sessions and send things to you in between time. And each webinar will be recorded for you to view later. They'll be published privately on YouTube, not for the general public. This evening's webinar will be for people who are interested, and it will be made public. But the course will not be public. It will only be for those who have registered. Some recommended books that I can offer you now are an excellent one by Llewellyn Vaughan Lee, a Sufi master, who has compiled essays by wonderful people, including Joanna Macy and others, called Spiritual Ecology. Stephen Herod Booner has written a remarkable book called Plant Intelligence and the Imaginal Realm. And he speaks about nature in sometimes using the analogy or metaphor of jazz, which I really enjoy. And then Robin Wall Kimmerer has written a beautiful book called Braiding Sweetgrass. And she's a biologist, I think she's a biologist, and a native elder. And it's her combination of the indigenous ways with the scientific wisdom that is beautifully, and her writing is exquisite. I can recommend her book as well. So as we move close to our closing time, my pledge to you in doing this work, as well as offering some of the keys to communing with nature that I've learned over the years, I will welcome your stories and your experiences of deep connectedness to nature with great respect and compassion. For we all need to listen to what the earth is conveying to us at this critical time. It takes many ears, many hearts, for she has so much to say. And as she said in the earlier poem, we have so many ways to listen. So it's my privilege to listen with you. At this point, I would open it up for any questions that you might ask. We could unmute people, or we could do this through the chat box. What's your feeling, Alicia?
I think the chat box is a good place to start.
Okay. So if you have any questions or comments before we do our final closing, I would welcome them at this point. And Alicia, if you have anything else to add, because you walked with me through this webinar series last year, I'd appreciate your thoughts.
Mm-hmm. I found that it supported me to create a habitual practice of communing with nature during the course that lasted beyond my regular walks in the forest with my puppy and all the other things I do. I did consciously take my relationship with the natural world around my home to a deeper level, and I really appreciated the structure that the webinars gave for me to put that time, set aside that time. It inspired me to set aside more time for that with some guidance, so that was lovely.
Thanks, Alicia. I know you've been very faithful on that score.
Brad says, thanking you very much. I commune with the beginnings of nature daily. Newfoundland, the cornerstone of all nature, is what helped call me here. Pangaea, the original landmass of Gaia. All landmass started here in the North Atlantic.
Thank you, Brad.
OT says, I know OT was in the last, or she's done the Communing with Nature course. She says, the course made me realize what is home for me.
Yes, you've certainly been faithful to your commitment to nature, Odie. I appreciate that. Well, if there are no more comments or questions, I'd like to just close our time with a moment of gratitude. And I would like to thank everyone for coming this evening, for your interest in this deep work of restoration. It is not just restoration separate from us of what is out there. What is out there is intimately woven into what is inside each of us. So we do this work of communing for very personal and intimate reasons. And I look forward to exploring how that blossoms for each of us in the weeks to come. Good night, all.